It's only the first week of an election year, but so much is happening, it's hard to keep up. Much of the news centered on whether or not states will allow Donald Trump to appear on their ballots, especially in the primary. Take a look at this map real quick. Colorado and Maine are the states where Trump has been disqualified from the primary ballot for now. Those decisions under appeal, of course. Here in Minnesota and 4 other states, courts decided to keep him on the primary ballot. We'll talk about why in a second. And in Oregon, a decision is still pending. Now, the decisions to take Trump off the ballot are based on the 14th Amendment, which says officials who have engaged in, quote, insurrection are disqualified from holding federal office. Just yesterday, the U.S. Supreme Court said it will decide the Colorado case. It's going to take that case on, which could pave the way for the primaries and the general elections ahead. This is a huge talker, and we want to go straight at it. Timothy Johnson is professor of political science and law at the University of Minnesota. Welcome, sir.
Thanks for having me.
You're also my absolute go-to on anything Supreme Court and anything U.S. Constitution.
I appreciate that.
So I've always enjoyed our conversations. Appreciate you coming on. All right, so former President Trump is off the ballot for now in Colorado and Maine. What is their reasoning for that?
Sure. The reasoning goes back to the third section of the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, and it is what most commentators say a little-known clause only because it hasn't really been used at all since the Civil War.
Right.
And that clause says that any official or servant of the United States who has taken an oath to the Constitution and then has engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the United States may never again hold office either at the federal level or the state level, with one exception, and that is if 2/3 of both houses of Congress would get rid of that for any particular individual.
Which won't happen, because neither party owns 2/3.
That's right.
He hasn't been adjudicated, though. He hasn't been convicted of these charges. So how does the court have the ability to rule on that without like a formal conviction?
Right, so that's the question. That's the question the Supreme Court will take up when it hears oral arguments on February 8th. The argument would be in favor of the idea that he could have this clause apply to him without being convicted, is that if you look at how it was applied during the Civil War, none of those folks from the South who were told that they could not hold office because they were insurrectionists were ever convicted of a thing.
Okay.
They were just given a deal that said, we will essentially let you off of criminal charges, but given this clause, you will never again be able to run for federal office.
Interesting. So there's another point that I feel like most of the major papers are missing. Minnesota looked at this case too, and the Supreme Court said essentially, no. Trump can be on the primary ballot because we have no say in the primary ballot. The primaries are a First Amendment speech of the parties. It's the party's decision. The state has nothing to do with it. Am I wrong?
No, you're absolutely right.
So why does Colorado and Maine have the ability to kick him off when it's the First Amendment speech of the party that's at stake?
Sure, because in this case, given that the states have the power to determine most of the election rules surrounding even federal elections, different states, and we have 50 of them, are going to have different rulings. And so the Secretary of State in Maine makes one ruling on her own, the state Supreme Court of Colorado makes its ruling, and now the Minnesota Supreme Court made its ruling in the fall. And now we will get in February, and then hopefully a decision by early March, the U.S. Supreme Court saying, here's what the real answer is for all 50 states.
Wow. So this will come down to the U.S. Supreme Court, in which President Trump put 3 justices on it, correct?
Yes.
So how is this going to affect, forget the primaries, how is this going to affect the general election? And what can people expect from an expert like you? Like what are they facing?
Right, so I think that the court is going to face the idea of how to interpret those words and whether or not the 14th Amendment, specifically again Section 3, applies to a president of the United States or a former president of the United States in this case. And in fact, that is what this entire case will come down to. Now, it really will also come down to ideology and partisanship, and the question will be whether or not the justices will apply the law and interpret that amendment in a way that they would normally interpret it, that is, with the plain meaning of the words, or whether their ideology will come into play. And if it does come into play in this case, then it's pretty clear that Trump probably will win his case.
And like in no way, shape, or form is this going to make people feel better, regardless of the outcome.
I think that's right. I mean, you go back
It's
to
bad.
It's bad. You go back to 2000 and Bush versus Gore, which is now almost a quarter century ago, and the court took a real hit to its legitimacy after that decision. At that time, the court's legitimacy was pretty high. It took a small hit. Now its legitimacy is very low, and it's going to take a major hit no matter which way it decides.
Professor Tim Johnson, thank you so much.
Good to
Appreciate
see
your
you.
time, man.
Thank
Hope we
you.
sorted some things out for everybody at home. We'll be right back.